Three boys come down to the kitchen and sit around the breakfast table on a Saturday morning. Their mother asks the oldest boy what he'd like to eat. "I'll have some fucking French toast," he says. The mother's outraged at his crude language. She hits him and sends him upstairs. When she calms down, she asks the middle child what he wants. "Well, I guess that leaves more fucking French toast for me," he says. Mom is livid. She smacks him and sends him away. Finally, she looks at the youngest son and asks him what he wants for breakfast. "I don't know," he says meekly, "but I definitely don't want the fucking French toast." Good morning. It is Wednesday, September the 21st, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the daily declaration for spiritual warfare and the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star-Spangled Banner, we'll have Christy Teigen, Martha's Vineyard, Mark K. 1, 2, and 3, Don Lemon, Alex Epstein, student loans, Hannity DeSantis, Tucker Carlson, no free lunch. All that and more when I come back. Thank you. And now the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare, Biblical Principles to Defeat the Devil for September 23rd. "I will not let sin reign in my mortal body, nor will I obey its lusts. Never again will I be bound, for Christ has made me free. I am free indeed. I will produce the fruit of righteousness and holiness. Never again will I walk in the works of the flesh, but I will manifest the fruit of the Spirit. Amen." And that was the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for September the 23rd. Thank you. Why am I the only true conservative in the United States today? Because I'm the only person in the United States of America that knows that the government has no rights. Back in a minute. Thank you. What is the true conservatives' strategy for defeating the left? True conservatives must take the Democrats' issues away from them. True conservatives must convince the country that they are the party of gun control, feminism, environmentalism, and racial diversity. To win, the true conservative must fight to own the left's issues. The left claims that there exists left-wing issues and right-wing issues. Wrong. The left claims women's rights, the environment, civil rights, racial and sexual, labor, and poverty as their issues. Wrong. If true conservatives are allowed the left to define political positions, they will never win. True conservatives must fight for all political constituencies if they hope to survive and thrive. To fight and win these battles, we must appeal to people's natural conservative tendencies. The true conservative is the true feminist, true environmentalist, true civil rights champion, and true friend to labor and the poor, because that's the way it is. We respect the independence of the individual, regardless of who they are, while the left demands fealty and obedience. Thank you very much. And now there's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Quote, your argument is that the technological advance should result in a general price decline. But to a classical economist, that's like saying that as modern golfers hit the ball farther and further with better equipment, the yardstick should gradually lengthen. When the dollar is kept stable, technological advances are translated into shorter units of time needed to produce goods and services. Unquote. Jude Wanniski. Prices may come down in a market economy from competitive forces at play, but the advances that we want in a growing economy are not price declines or increases, as much as improved quality of life in the process of producing goods and services. The focus on price makes the unit of measurement the activity instead of the underlying activity. It is highly convoluted. While ample disagreements exist as to how to achieve sound and stable money, it is the disregard for the objective of sound money that has been most disruptive. And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now Sean Hannity, and he introduces Ron DeSantis to respond to charges made by the Bexar County Sheriff.
One liberal county in Texas is also investigating Ron DeSantis. They are accusing him of, quote, leaving migrants to fend for themselves in Martha's Vineyard. Here to respond, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. You know, the great irony in all of this is if we use the left's definition of racism and xenophobia, they're it. They define it based on their actions in Martha's Vineyard. What they're missing is Joe Biden has been flying and busing illegal immigrants every day all over the country, and in the dark of night, just leaving them in the middle of the street. So why are they only now paying attention to 50 people that you sent?
Well, Sean, it's really frustrating because you've been covering this. Millions of people since Biden's been president illegally coming across the southern border. Did they freak out about that? No. You've had migrants die in the Rio Grande, yet 50 die in Texas in a trailer because they were being neglected. Was there a freak out about that? No, there wasn't. You've had criminal aliens get across that southern border and victimize Americans, killing some, raping some. Was there any type of outrage about that? No. And then, of course, we know fentanyl deaths are at an all-time high. Where's that fentanyl coming from? It's coming over the open southern border. It's only when 50 get put into Martha's Vineyard, which wasn't saying they didn't want this. They said they wanted this. They said they were a sanctuary jurisdiction. These were people who were basically destitute and then put in a situation where they could have succeeded, but that was all virtue signaling. And not only did they not welcome them, they deported them the next day with the National Guard. Give me a break.
Yeah, and by the way, just for the record, this was voluntary. All migrants were put up in hotels, given accommodations. They were fed, they were showered, they were offered haircuts and any other services that they were needed, correct?
Yeah, not only that, they all signed consent forms to go. And then the vendor that is doing this for Florida provided them with a packet that had a map of Martha's Vineyard. It had the numbers for different services on Martha's Vineyard, and then it had numbers for the overall agencies in Massachusetts that handle things involving immigration and refugees. So it was clearly voluntary, and all the other nonsense you're hearing is just not true. And why wouldn't they want to go, given where they were? They were in really, really bad shape, and they got to be cleaned up, everything treated well, and then put in a situation. Because, Sean, there are jobs available in Martha's Vineyard. There is lodging available in Martha's Vineyard. Had they lived up to what they billed themselves at as a sanctuary jurisdiction, they could have absorbed those people without a problem. But here's the thing. They said they didn't have housing. They said they couldn't accommodate. Let's just say that's true for a minute. Well, what does that mean for these poor towns in Texas? What does it mean for these other places across the country that are seeing influx? What does it mean to these small towns that Biden has dumped so many people in? And so I think what we've been able to do is show that this border is a disaster. Biden has failed on this as much or more than on any other policy, and now people are talking about it, and we want solutions as Americans. We want to make sure that Trump's policies of remain in Mexico can be reinstituted so we can get control over what's going on down there.
You know, Governor, it's kind of hard to fathom. 19 months ago, you're right, our borders were secure. We had stay in Mexico. We eliminated catch and release. Now we have process release, give a free phone. You get preferential treatment. You don't get a COVID vaccine mandate. And then you have free transportation to the state of your choice. This is madness. We had our borders controlled. We had 1.4% inflation, not 8.5%. We didn't have, we're now paying double the amount for a gallon of gasoline. We didn't have that problem. We wouldn't have had a disaster in Afghanistan. All of this has happened in 19 months. What do you see as the answer beyond 50 days from now when Americans go to the voting booth and you're up for re-election?
Generic Viagra in CVS costs $45 per 100 milligram tablet. But with a newly announced program.
Well, Sean, I think we should point out, they accuse the governors of Arizona, Texas, and me of political stunts in terms of dealing with illegal immigration. But the biggest stunt was Biden coming into office and reversing Trump's policies, not because Trump's policies weren't working. He reversed them because he wanted to virtue signal to his base, and he wanted to show that he thought Donald Trump was bad, and that's why he reversed it. And he reversed it knowing what would end up happening, and so he has pulled the biggest political stunt. Look, I think people need to press the case on this in the midterms. We know the inflation, the economy, as you said, is going to be a big issue. Crime's going to be a huge issue. But this immigration and border, I think, is now a front burner issue, and I think this is one where Republicans have the advantage without question. So run on it, and then if we do get majorities in the Congress, Sean, they need to do something with that power to hold Biden accountable on this issue.
I think borders, I think energy, I think the economy, I think lower taxes, you're right, law and order, parental rights and education. All of this is on the ballot in 50 days, and I hope the American people see this for what it is. There's a part of me that doesn't really want to ask you this question because I don't think Gavin Newsom is particularly bright, and every time he deals with you, he comes out on the wrong end of it. But I'll ask anyway. I would actually love to see him explain why he shut down California, and they couldn't go out to eat, but he went out to eat. He let his kids have in-school education. Every other kid that didn't have a private school education, they were forced to study remote. I'd like him to explain his 13.5% state income tax to your 0% and his sanctuary state law breaking to your maintaining the law and order. And I don't know what he meant by the kidnapping comment. Maybe you can tell me what that meant because I have no clue.
Well, Sean, we've had an influx of people from California, and they're moving because they're dissatisfied with what's gone on over there. I think that the only issue, anytime you're there, you got to worry about all the different things with crime and the homelessness. But you also got to worry about, could they even keep the lights on for some type of an event? I mean, they seem to have a lot of problems with that as well. So we're happy with what we're doing in Florida. And I think at the end of the day, Sean, people can politically preen. They can say all this stuff. But look how people behave. Look how people vote with their feet. And since I I've been governor, it's been unmistakable. People look for freedom, and we're the first place they look. And people have come not just from New York, New Jersey, as you know, that's always happened, not just from the Midwest, which has always happened, even from the Pacific coast of this country, going all the way across North America to be able to live in the state of Florida. And we're proud that we've been that symbol for many people.
Governor, for the first time in California's history, they've had a net decrease in population. How many new people are moving to Florida on a daily basis? Do you have the exact number?
I don't have the exact, but we've led the nation in net in-migration. And on net, we've had over 225,000 the last 2 years, probably on average. And we've had more wealth move into Florida than has ever moved into an individual state over a similar period of time in American history, even adjusted for inflation. And oh, by the way, Sean, who's losing the most population and the most wealth? California, New York, Illinois.
Very well said. All right, so you're out on the campaign trail. Your race is pivotal for Republicans. So is Marco Rubio's race. How do you feel your races are going? And I know you've also been doing some campaigning around the country. What are the arguments that you would make? To me, it's very simple. The list that we just went over, if you run on, are you better off than you were 19 months ago in terms of your energy prices, in terms of border security? Are you better off with a state that closed down for COVID? You had kids in school in August of 2020. What are the arguments you think people should be making, Republicans should be making?
Well, first here in Florida, people are fired up. I mean, our voters want to come out. I think we're going to have a record-setting turnout, particularly amongst Republicans. And so we're looking forward to that. As you mentioned, I'm running, Senator Rubio. We also have congressional races, legislative races, school board. So this is really, really important, and we're working really hard. I think we're going to do really well. But I think you nailed it across the country. Prosecute the case against what Biden has done. Things were cheaper before he was president. Your gas was cheaper. Our country was safer before he was president. Hit him on the crime, and obviously our border was more secured. And yes, I do think you pointed out the parents' rights and the education. These are huge issues because I think the left has gone so radical on this. They want to use the schools to indoctrinate our kids, and that's not what the American people want. They think schools should be to educate kids, not to indoctrinate them. So hold them accountable on things like critical race theory, gender ideology. None of that stuff is appropriate in the schools, but almost every single Democrat will have to say that they support that because that's what the far left of their base wants to see.
Fascinating. No Democrat wants to be seen with Joe Biden either when he goes to campaign. I didn't finish the question. Last question. You have any interest in debating good old Gavin Newsom on his record taxes, state income taxes?
Well, like I said, Sean, I don't know if they can reliably keep the power on. So you go all the way up there and have a debate, and then what ends up happening if they can't keep the lights on? So, we're happy with what we're doing. What I do, though, Sean, my actions speak louder than my words. There's certain people that'll preen and do that. I understand. We get things done in Florida.
My favorite line is, whatever you do, don't charge your electric vehicle during these hours. So you have to park it for this amount of time. That was my favorite. Governor, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. Hey, Sean.
And that was Sean Hannity and Governor DeSantis. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of Alex Epstein.
And then the broader point is that nature is not a very good place. And how good the world is for human beings depends on our ability to master nature. And what fossil fuels do is they give us the low-cost, reliable energy to power a huge number of amazing machines that allow us to master nature by being incredibly productive and prosperous. And I think people just have the totally wrong perspective about the Earth and fossil fuels' role on the Earth. We're taught that we've made the climate bad and it's going to get worse. And what this points to is that the natural climate is not this wonderful place. It's actually a very dynamic and dangerous place. And the thing that matters most is our ability to master it. So to alleviate drought via irrigation and drought relief convoys, to use heating and air conditioning, to use sturdy weatherproof buildings, etc. And then the broader point is that nature is not a very good place. And how good the world is for human beings depends on our ability to master nature. And what fossil fuels do is they give us the low-cost, reliable energy to power a huge number of amazing machines that allow us to master nature by being incredibly productive and prosperous. And I think people just have the totally wrong perspective about the Earth and fossil fuels' role on the Earth.
Oops, and that was Alex Epstein. Thank you. And now there's a little clip from, I think her name's Rasheed, the Democrat from Michigan. And so let's see how this goes.
Energy agency has said is required to meet our global 2050 net.
Just a second. Let me see.
Zero targets of limiting global temperature rise to 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.5 degrees Celsius. So no new fossil fuel production starting today. That's like zero. So I would like to ask all of you and go down the list because again, you all have agreed to doing this. Please answer with a simple yes or no. Does your bank have a policy against funding new oil and gas products? Mr. Diamond.
Absolutely not, and that would be the road to hell for America.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Sir, you have all committed, as you all know, to transition the emissions from lending and investment activities to align with pathways to net zero in 2050. Do you know what the International Energy Agency has said is required to meet our global 2050 net zero targets of limiting global temperature rise to 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.5 degrees Celsius? So no. Anyway,
so that was her in front of I guess she was doing it on TV or whatever because it seemed that it was from her. She was doing it from her office, so it was I guess one of those Venmo video things. But anyhow, so she I thought it was interesting because she again comes out and she's trying to get banks to refuse to finance any, I guess, oil companies, and people that are going to go out and look for new sources of oil, gas, or coal. And the one guy, I liked his response. No, that would be the road to hell for the United States of America. So, back in a minute. Thank you. And now Ted Cruz, a clip of Ted Cruz on Varney and Company.
That suddenly they noticed and said something, and sadly, for much of the corporate media, they're in the same boat. They ignore it when there's suffering and chaos and death on the Texas border. And yet, these left-wing politicians pretend it is wonderful. It wasn't until the illegal immigrants interfered with Buffy's tea time that suddenly they noticed and said something, and sadly, for much of the corporate media, they're in the same boat. They ignore it when there's suffering and chaos and death on the Texas border, but when someone disturbs some left-wing billionaire, suddenly it's news. And yet, these left-wing...
So, a recording, but a little bit rough. I did want to say about these moving the migrants around. Is it truly conservative what Governor Abbott, and Governor DeSantis are doing? The answer is yes, and this is why. There's a two-prong test to decide whether or not something being done is truly conservative. First prong is, are they making the presumption for the status quo? In this particular case, what they're doing is making a change, right? Normally, the immigrants come to the border, they settle in whatever city, county they happen to come over the border to. And so is there a prima facie case for change to deport them or send them somewhere else? And the answer obviously is yes, that there's precious few resources left in the border states and their communities, and so they have to be sent somewhere else. We have illegal immigrants in Del Rio, Texas, that are sleeping on the ground. in Del Rio, Texas, because there's nowhere else for them to go. So that just adds, and creates more problems. So the number one test, yes, they've met that. There is an obvious case for change. So they did it. Next question. Is their solution oriented towards creating a perfect world, or is their solution more practical? And the answer is here is more practical. They're minding their own business. They're not trying to change the world. All they're trying to do is make things better in their little corner of the world. So the answer is yes, these are moving the migrants around the country is truly conservative because they're minding their own business and they're making the presumption for the status quo. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now also from Twitter is a tweet from Bishop Thomas Tobin. Quote, President Biden cannot be both a devout Catholic and a pro-abortion zealot. The two are mutually exclusive. He's a poor, lost, and confused soul. Truly, we need to pray for him every day. And that was, again, a tweet from Bishop Tobin. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of Tucker Carlson about myocarditis.
So another topic that no one in the medical industry wants to talk about, and that's the COVID vaccine. And in some people who received it, there appears to be serious heart damage, far more than the experts thought would occur. The Lancet just surveyed young people ages 12 to 29 who suffered from myocarditis, heart damage, after taking the COVID shot. According to the Lancet, 90 days after myocarditis symptoms emerged, roughly 26% of young people who surveyed still needed daily medication because their hearts were so damaged. 20% said they had problems with their daily activities. 30% said they experienced pain. How will they be at age 60, you wonder? And of course, you know the answer. Hospitals were perfectly aware of this, and they're warning children about it. This is a new advertisement from New York Presbyterian Hospital. Watch.
I've been into fashion since I can remember. But one day I had a stomach ache so bad I didn't want to do anything. The team at New York Presbyterian said it was actually my heart. It was severely swollen, something called myocarditis. But doctors gave me medicines and used machines to control my heartbeat. They saved me. So now I can become the next great fashion designer.
Severe heart damage in otherwise healthy children? Oh, yeah, we've always had that. No, we haven't, actually. And Dr. Marty Makary was virtually alone in the medical community when he warned about the risks of this. He warned for months. In March, he wrote to the CDC and said, you've got a duty to, quote, rigorously study the long-term effects of vaccine-induced myocarditis. He was not celebrated for this. Of course, he was attacked, as always. Dr. Makary is a professor at Johns Hopkins and joins us tonight. Doctor, thanks so much for coming on and for sounding the call early. Is the idea going to be this is totally normal? It's always been this way?
Well, they famously downplayed it. The CDC director last year said if we vaccinate 1 million children, there might be 30 or 40 cases of mild myocarditis. And they said if you get myocarditis from COVID, that's worse or happens at a higher rate. But that's not true. The studies have come out. Europe reacted by banning the Moderna vaccine altogether in young people in many parts of Europe, and everybody under 30, and in other places, everybody under 40. The tragedy that we're now learning that there's significant heart damage, 31% of people having physical activity restrictions. The Seattle study, that 63% of children after myocarditis had evidence of heart swelling months down the road on MRI. So we were playing with fire. We didn't know what we were dealing with. They undercounted the complication rate, making the vaccine look safer than it really was, overcounting cases in young people and hospitalizations, making the COVID infection look more dangerous than it really was. And the tragedy is that we could have saved children from myocarditis. We could have protected this nation's children from myocarditis. We could have spaced out the vaccine instead of that narrow 3-week interval. No vaccine's given 3 weeks apart, and the myocarditis happens after the second dose. We could have let parents say, if you only feel comfortable with one dose, it's okay to stop there. Instead, we put a gun to their head saying you got to come back in 3 weeks, and if you don't agree, you're in deep trouble. And we could have been honest about the risk. In healthy children, that risk is so low, it's lower than the risk of the vaccine.
It's shocking. If your child has heart damage at the age of 14, how is she going to do at 50? I mean, no one seems to be thinking about the future. You have, though, and we're grateful for it. Dr. Marty McCary of Johns Hopkins.
And that was Tucker Carlson and about myocarditis in children. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. Until next time, remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.